So today we're going to paint pumpkins, and one of them we've hollowed out, being very creative, right? And put some of our fall branches and stuff in. Is my idea. I put a little sun up in the left-hand corner to remind us that that's where our light's going to come from. You could, of course, have the light come from another side if you wanted to, but I kind of wanted these sides of the pumpkins to have a little highlight. And then the shadows cast this way. That was my idea. And you could just do one pumpkin if you'd rather do that. But I thought I'd do the three here, and then I'll do some branches and some little maple leaves here. I love maple leaves. So that's what we're going to do. That's what I'm going to demo. So as I already said to you, if you'd like to fill your pumpkins with other types of a bouquet, with any kind of flowers, sunflowers or cone flowers would look really cool too, or teasels or whatever. You just use your imagination. As I always say, there's absolute and complete artistic freedom in my classes. But that's what I'm going to demo. And what I have done is I have just very lightly traced out the three pumpkins and then a couple of the leaves that are overlapping my big pumpkin. And the rest I'm going to leave kind of to my imagination. And the way we're going to start it is we're going to start it with putting in a very light background, just from the top down. I'm not going to go all the way down here because that we can paint later because it's going to be a little bit darker. But I'd like to get a little bit of the background in, and I want to throw some salt in. And I have salt here that you can borrow from me. I have fine salt. This is also fine salt, and this is coarse salt. They all give a little bit of fine and coarse, they give a little bit of a different texture, but doesn't matter. It's like, looks kind of frosty when you put salt in. So I like that for this type of a painting. And so the first color I'm going to be using is probably, if you have it, cobalt blue. If you don't have cobalt blue, don't fret. You can just use your French ultramarine blue, or you can use cerulean blue, or manganese blue, or peacock blue. Whatever you want to use, you can use. So let's see here. I do want kind of a more or less brilliant sky. So I'm going to put some cobalt in, and I might actually, just for fun, throw a little bit of my Antwerp blue into it. Can you see how that's a different blue?
Mm-hmm. With green in it.
It's darker, and it's quite a bit greener. And can you observe another thing when I do like this? Who's pushing whom?
Oh, interesting.
Oh. Yeah, the Antwerp blue that's the pushy guy, even though I do have a slanted here a little bit, but yeah. But
you're cheating.
Yeah, but it is truly the Antwerp moves a lot more. Cobalt doesn't move that much. So can you see how it kind of changed up my blue a little bit by putting that in? So that's kind of fun. And I'm just gonna, now I don't want my sky to be too dark, but I want a little darker at the top and then lighter as go down. So there's that.
It's not wet on wet.
It's gonna be wet on wet, but remember, always mix your puddles first, because what happens if you wet your paper and then you go over here and mix your puddles, what's gonna happen to the paper? It's gonna be dry. And not that it matters that much, but I mean, I'd rather just wet it once, or however many times I need to, but and not. So it's, especially, again, we live in a very dry climate, as we all know. So we have to be fast painters. Now, if we were out there on the coast or down in the southwest, hot and humid, or humid.
Southeast.
Yeah.
Not southwest.
Southeast. Yeah, not southwest. Southeast. Down in the southeast, like Florida and places, Alabama, places like that. They can have tea breaks in between. We can't.
What were you doing with your eraser just then?
So what I do with my eraser is that's my, I am not so crazy about having a lot of graphite on my paper from my pencil line. So I tend to just kind of take my kneaded eraser, kneaded, have a clean side, and then if I see some like little dark lines, I kind of dab them out. And that's just my own little thing. And what happens to me is I always end up dabbing out the lines too much so that I can't see anything. So I could just have left it. That's just my own little hang up there. And there's nothing wrong with seeing the lines in a watercolor. It's a matter of taste. I happen to not enjoy it in my own paintings. Other painters, they love, I mean, it's really is a personal preference. Some painters, it's part of, that's their style. You can see their pencil lines and they like it. They say, I want people to see the process. And I can appreciate that in somebody else's painting, but not so much in my own. That's why I always dab them out. But it's not like wrong to have the lines in. All right, so
once the lines are there, and
they're hard to erase.
you can't erase them afterwards.
Very
You'll take
difficult.
off paint too if you were to
Well,
erase, right?
it's just that they get sealed in
Oh,
by the water and the pigment to a pretty high degree. It's not that easy to get them out. So now I'm putting water on from the edges in towards, I don't really want water going over the pumpkins. So I try to be a little careful and I go down to about here. I can give it a little run off there. And I'll hold it up so you can see it later, okay?
So you don't wet the back like we did before.
I not right now. I'm painting on 300, so I don't really have to worry about it. You can still spray a little bit on the back and I might do that, but not the whole paper where I wet it. So let's just see what we got here. Yeah, so pretty okay. So now I'm just gonna go a little closer here, and of course I can take a smaller brush. And I like to go down on the sides, that way it's kind of like the pigment has somewhere to escape. So just like that. And I'm gonna just put on a little bit more and I'm gonna hold it up so you can see it. But I try to stay out of my leaves and my pumpkins as best I can, because what happens with where we have water, that's where the pigment's gonna go. No matter how much you yell at it, don't go there, don't go there.
So
If you have water on, that's where it's gonna go.
You're wetting your background first.
I'm wetting my background, and so now I can hold it up so hopefully you can you kind of see?
yeah.
And so I tried, I mean, it's not gonna be 100% precise, but I try to stay out of my pumpkins. And I don't go all the way down. You can, it doesn't matter. But my idea is I just want, down to about here with that blue color. And then they're sitting on something else. They're not sitting on air, so.
So I traced all the little flowers going on.
And the
Yeah,
berries.
yeah.
But I just wet right over the
Yeah,
top of
just
those.
wet over those. You can't paint around those. So now I'm doing the same with my pigment. Yeah, just paint right over them if you've traced them in. That's totally fine. And it might be helpful for you to have them traced in. And what I would do is, I might go in then and just with a tissue kind of dab out while it's still wet.
Oh, yeah.
So that you don't have too much color inside where you're going to have branches and berries and stuff. So now, I have pretty much the color on I want. Let's see, maybe a little bit more up here. I like to have it a little darker at the top. Whoops. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take not my dot bottle, but my mister bottle. The one that gives a fine mist, like that. And I'm going to move my hand and I'm just going to spray a little bit, and I'm holding my paper, as you can see, so that gravity will carry the paint down towards the edge and not into my stuff. And I can also have it a little bit like this. I just want to get a little bit of a soft edge around here, and that's easiest to do with just misting on a little bit and then have it run this way.
So are you catching it then at the end with a big towel, or?
You don't have to. I mean, you can if, it all depends on how much. I don't need to do that right now. I don't really have much to catch. And since it's all blue, I'm not going to get mud anywhere. Right. So I'm just trying, I don't want to have like too many hard lines and stuff like that. And again, you can spray a little bit on the back, on the top part. If it's curling too much, and you can see how I just want to have a little variety in my colors, but not too much. And so with a little bit of water, I can kind of move it. And then if I have a hard edge, so I take one of my round brushes and I have it just damp. If I have some areas here where I feel like here, see there's a weird shape there, just go in with a damp brush while it's still very wet. Don't try and do that when it's beginning to dry, because then you're going to get a big old mark. But there, just get rid of a couple of those hard edges. Maybe a little bit here. But don't get too fiddly with it. And see, there's that little drop. But since it's blue, I can run it back in again if I wanted to. And then I'm just going to wipe down my board here a little bit so it's not too wet. And then I can run that little thing off here. So you just hold your tissue, not dab on, but just hold it here so it can pick up that little extra drop. And there we have a nice background. And I wanted to have it the darkest at the top. And then it gets lighter and lighter. And now I'm just going to watch it for just a minute. And then I'm going to throw some salt on it. Now I can see there is a little bit of it's extra. Can you tell that it's a little extra wet over here, wetter than there? Can you tell that?
Yeah.
This is all those little things. So I have a feeling that here there's something gathering, and it will probably run back in and get blooming when I'm not looking. So I'm just trying to take care of that. Okay. And now I think.
So you were saying blooming from the edge? Is that what
From the edge, then it runs back in. Here it's beginning to dry, but then you have something wet there, and it creeps in.
Right.
You know, when you're looking away, seems like it. Now I take a little bit of my salt. It's like cooking, ladies. Gonna sprinkle on a little bit. So you want to do it while it's still wet, not dripping wet. The best effect I'm probably going to get over here where it's began to dry a little bit. It's a little wetter over here. And I like to get some in on the edges here. If I have some hard edges, that's going to help take care of them. So I'm going to leave the salt on, just not have it on my pumpkin here, because it's not 100% dry. The way you can feel if something is dry or not, I mean, you can see, but if you just very gently kind of barely touch it with the back of your hand, because you don't have, unless you just put lotion on, then don't do it. But you can feel it's kind of cold. If it feels cold, it means it's still drying. So it still might be kind of dry on the surface, but inside it still has a lot of dampness. So, but that's okay. So what I did was I got some of my transparent yellow out and my Quinacrodone red. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet the big pumpkin. So I'm going to get a bigger brush, and I'm going to try and get around as good as I can around my leaves that are sticking into the pumpkin. So I'm just going to go around like that, and then of course go around the pumpkin that's below. And I turn my paper around, so see, is that good? Hopefully I don't get like my head in there filming, I don't know. I didn't like the way it, for some reason, the other stand that I used last time, the black one, it had made a black shadow on the
side.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened.
Now,
So then I went back.
If you want to make the lobes each look a little bit different, do you just do each lobe separately?
First we paint the big shapes, and then later we go in and break them up into, so right now I'm just putting color on them.
Okay.
Pretty light.
Okay.
I don't like to paint them separately, because then they become so separate it's too much. I think it's better to break them up afterwards, because then, as they go in, they'll have shadow. So that's going to break them up. Take them apart. So that's what I like to on the pumpkin. So you can see
Because I
here.
was wondering, like that one you have the picture of with the green and the orange.
Yeah,
type of
I'll
thing.
show you how to paint that. But
Okay.
yeah, that'll come.
Okay.
That'll come, because that's but this one's just orange. Basic orange pumpkin. So what I'm going to do is, so we already decided our light was coming from there. I'm going to take a little bit of my clean transparent yellow, and then I'm actually going to put it in here on the sunny side and a little bit on here maybe. That's where they're gonna be the lightest. And then don't even have to rinse out my brush. I can just leave that little bit of yellow on, and then I'm gonna go into the red, get a little bit more yellow in, and make myself a nice orange. It's a pretty nice orange. And I'm not gonna go too dark to start with, because the whole idea is, I'm gonna build it up as we go. So that yellow has a little bit of a chance to sink into the paper. And now I have my brush here loaded with orange, and I'm gonna start on the shadow side. And I'm gonna get that, I like that. That's a nice orange, I think. And then I'm here, while I have the chance, I'm gonna kind of do a little negative painting, it's called, around that leaf. And then I'm gonna go down here.
So you didn't wet that area?
I did wet it,
But not by the leaf?
No.
not the leaf, because I'm not painting the leaf, so
Right,
I
so
wet
I'm
everything
saying
else.
when you're doing the negative, you were actually a little bit of dry into that area? Or?
I'm painting negatively around it, meaning that I'm painting everything except the leaves here.
Oh, okay.
That's
what
called
you mean by
negative painting.
Okay.
That's when you're painting. I mean, I'm painting positive and negative at the same time, because
Right.
positively, obviously, I'm painting the pumpkin, but I'm painting negatively around those things that are sticking into my pumpkin, so to speak. So I'm gonna just add a little bit of water, and then just go in up here, get around here, and around here. So I have to just be a little fast, because otherwise things are gonna dry on me. And can you see my color is getting lighter, because I'm using up that color that I had in the brush. But I'm also using a very big brush, because that way I don't have to reload all the time. And I can just keep going. And then let's go down here. Can you see how that yellow underneath it just kind of gives it that little bit of an extra glow? And then up here. And I'm just, again, that's called negative painting, when I'm painting around the shapes of those leaves. So I'm negatively painting around them. So there's that.
The other pumpkin.
That brush is number 30, I think. It's a big brush.
I have a big one like that.
And you don't want to paint something like this with too small of a brush, because then it's going to dry on you before you're done painting the pumpkin. And I'm just going in here and correcting a few shapes. And there's the pumpkin painted. And can you see how that yellow underneath it just kind of gives it that little bit of extra glow? That's a little trick I learned a long time ago from Anne Apgott is her name. She has written a book called Daring Color. And now what I'm going in and doing is with a thirsty brush, I'm just picking up a little bit to highlight kind of like the centers. And now I think it's beginning to dry, can you tell? So I should probably stay the heck out of there,
Yeah. Can you
or I'll
paint,
get in trouble.
can you paint that little one that's not touching now too?
I can paint this one,
But
yes,
not the one that
but I can't paint that one.
So what was it again? You said you took the brush and you.
And so what I do is I make my brush thirsty. That means that
Oh,
you
you made it
get it clean, you squeeze out all the water so it's just damp. And when it's like that, it's like a sponge that you wrung to wipe something that you spilled on the kitchen counter, for instance. And then if you go in, it'll soak up. That's called a thirsty brush. And so you can, while the pigment is still damp, you can kind of lighten up an area. So I'm going to have this one orange also, and then this one I'm going to do like a green with a little bit of that orange in the indentations, like that little sample. Maybe somebody can grab the sample for me so I can show it. Yeah, and the other one was, so an orange one here, and then this one here. See how some of them are like that? I mean, this is a fake one, but they do actually come like that. Also, so I thought that would be kind of fun to throw a kind of that dark green in between the oranges, so it's not all orange. And my idea is that I want to do this orange a little bit different than that orange. I can either do it more yellow or I can do it more red. What would you prefer? You get the choice.
A fairy tale pumpkin.
A fairy tale pumpkin.
Have you seen those?
There's also white pumpkins, yes. So I'm gonna do the exact same.
They're silver.
Let me see, I wanna make sure I get it in there.
Like Cinderella. They have a horn like a unicorn.
So I'm gonna put water inside, like I did with the first one. And then I'm gonna do the same thing. I am gonna put a little bit of yellow. See, this right here would be hit by the light, right? Right here. A little bit there, a little bit there, maybe a little bit there. Kind of like that. We have all sorts of, we have cows and I don't know what. And so I think I'm gonna make, since I didn't hear any specific wishes, I think it's gonna be a little bit more reddish.
Okay.
A little bit more yellow right up there. But you know, we can have a lot of fun with this stuff. I hope my head is not going into the camera too much.
It's not.
Oh, good. Of course, that's so annoying. You come home, it's like, oh, the filming sucks. And then here. And I want to make sure that we can see. So I'm just getting the color on. There. There's that. So now we got color on this pumpkin number 2. And now this pumpkin, of course, is also touching this pumpkin. So we still have to wait a little tiny bit. Actually, I just see one thing that I don't like. So this one's supposed to, you know, make sure that it overlaps the other one. That's the whole idea there. And then we could do the same thing that we did with the first one. We could lift out a little bit in the middle of these and more on the top. Can you see how that already helps give it a little bit more shape?
Thank you.
And you know, if you were just doing like a quick impression, we could leave it like that.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody
Because
says you
no one
have
does.
to define everything so much. So I'm going to show you a couple of the leaves up here, of the green leaves. So that's these here. Going to have a little bit of green. You know, I mean, we have free choice, so to speak, with what color we want to give our leaves. But I want to have a little bit of green just because I want the contrast with the orange. So green, as we know, is yellow and some blue. And that's a nice light blue I got there.
Prussian and Antwerp really goes good with yellow.
Yeah, so here I can just do it on the dry for now. And even though I have a little bit of orange there, it doesn't matter. See, these leaves, I mean, remember they're, you know, they are beginning to decay, right? So but they can be brown, they can be all sorts of colors. So I'm just gonna do it like that, and then I'm gonna go in and dip my tip of my brush into some more of that blue, and then I get a darker green. And I just kind of dabbed it in, and then I let the watercolor paint it for me, might as well. So there's one, and then I can do, so the light's coming from here, so I'm just gonna, now I have a darker green on. Doesn't matter. You know, I want variety here, and I want some contrast. So now I'm gonna dip my green brush into a little bit of the yellow for this side before it dries on me. And I could have wet them, but I just painted on the dry.
So this is dry on dry?
This is wet on dry.
Oh, wet on dry.
Wet on dry, we call this, yeah.
So
Because my brush is
your
quite
brush
wet.
is wet.
Yeah. And so there's that. And then there's maybe one more here I could paint green. You know, it's my choice. It's my world. It's my pumpkin. You can decide. And so I do it a little darker there, a little bit like that. And then I'm going to rinse it out. Dab. And then maybe I'll just put a little bit of yellow on my brush while this is still damp. And that way I get a little bit of a highlight on that leaf there. And then back into the blue and just dab a little bit of that blue on here. So can you see how it get a little darkness there? And then before it dries on me, I'm gonna grab one of my credit cards and do the little vein scraping out. It's so much easier to do it this way. So there's a couple of veins, right? Same here.
I was thinking of that with these speckles. It's cute.
And then a little bit like that. I'm using the tip here. That little sharp tip. There. So now I would, and see that's a nice combination of the green and the orange. And I saw up here, I had another green leaf, so I just painted that in. And then here, I think that probably should have been orange. Maybe I'll just put another leaf there underneath that one. We shall see. So let's try and paint this one in, and that's the one I wanted it to be kind of like that. So we'll see how we can do that the best. So I'm going to wet the pumpkin. I have my puddles more or less ready here. I added on a little bit of blue and a little bit of red. Have my orange there. I have kind of a dirty yellow. I have a clean yellow there. I have a green there, and I have a blue that is clean. So I think we are good. So again, this has to be dry, that has to be dry before we can do anything. And I'm gonna leave that a little drier. I'm going to try to I think I'm going to try and get a little bit of that orange in that middle rib. It's kind of a yellowy orange like that. Bless you. So let's just start with getting that orange in here. And there's a little bit of that orange showing up here, 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 maybe a little bit there. I'm just going to dab that in, and then I'm going to clean my brush, and then let's get some of that green in. So I'm just going to start with not too darker green, just to kind of get going on it. So I do want them to run together a little bit, but not too much. I don't want the green to eat the orange completely, so to speak.
Is it dry?
It's dry some places, but you know, I did wet, but I just didn't wet everywhere, and I try to keep some drier spots where I wanted that orange, so it doesn't run too much. Let's see here. So I want to keep some of that orange, hopefully clean. So far so good. And get some more. Go around here. And can you see I'm doing my brush strokes in the direction of how the pumpkin grows, more or less. And then let's go in here. Because if I get some brush strokes showing, at least they're going to be not in a completely wrong direction, so then they're a little easier to deal with. I didn't do it as wet as I normally do because I don't want the orange to run into the green completely. Don't mind a little bit of a soft edge between the two colors, but I want to have some hard edge too.
So when you say not as wet, are you referring to where you put water onto the paper first, or
Yeah.
the actual paint that's on
And
the
I'm
brush?
also not painting like super wet on the brush. That's why I'm using a little bit of a smaller brush. Just so I have a little bit more control. So I'm almost there. Get up here.
If you were to put orange base on it and let it dry, and then put green on top and sprinkle it with salt, would it completely would it lift the green so you could see the orange like the
No, I
speckles?
don't
Or would it
think
make a
so.
mess?
I don't know. I don't know.
Oh, you're wanting to get this effect?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could have
Well,
orange behind and
to
lift
get that
the green.
effect, I'm just gonna, now I'm gonna darken my pumpkin first before I worry about that. So now I want like a darker green, now that I have my first layer on. Go in and do a little bit darker here, do a little bit darker there, and a little bit darker here around that stem. And go down here. And see, I'm leaving a little spot there, I'm leaving a little spot here. I can go in and hopefully put a little bit more of that orange on later. I want that rich dark. So this is a little bit more tricky, just because we are operating with two colors that are not exactly complementary colors, but they're pretty close to being complementary. You know, green and red are complementary colors. So if they run completely together, I'm gonna get like a brown, which I don't really want. So I'm trying to beat the system here. Thank you. And get in behind here. And then like there. And up here. All right, so far I'm pretty okay with what I got so far. That's not too bad. All right, so I'm gonna rinse out my brush, and now I'm gonna dip into a fairly strong mixture of orange, meaning not too much water. So I'm dabbing my brush on the towel, and then now I'm going to go in and see if I can get, so now I dabbed it too much. I want to go in and see if I can get a little bit more of that orange going in some of these spaces. Can you see those?
Yeah.
Like that. And down here. And there, I like that light, so let's go like that. So okay, so got a little bit more of that. And then clean my brush again, and now I'm gonna load it up with that orange one more time, and take with, you know, with the towel, just take out most of the moisture. And now I'm gonna go in before the green dries on me, and I'm gonna just freckle it, yes, while it's still damp, so that that orange has a chance to kind of push aside some of that green. There. So it gets a little bit of that speckled look.
Can we leave it optional?
Pardon me?
Can we leave it optional?
Yes, you can leave it optional. Of course. There's no, you don't have to do this. If this scares the bejesus out of you, don't do it. There's no, you know, you don't have to do that. But that's like probably the easiest way to get it on without it being like, you know, I don't want it like really hard line polka dot. I just want to have some of that texture in there. Now I should leave it alone. In the meantime, I can show you how I would paint some of those maple leaves. So I can put it in wet on dry. It's a small area, and so I make sure that I have it wet enough that it doesn't dry on me until I have the whole thing painted. And I can actually dip the tip into a little bit of a different color.
Yeah.
You know, because that way right away I get, and I could even go in and get a little bit of the yellow in, because that way you get, you know, I want to, these leaves, they're just so gorgeous. When I was drawing this thing, I was looking at those leaves, and they're just amazing. And they have exactly these kind of colors all mixed together. And you can also put in like a little bit of, you know, they also have these kinds of spots, right? Where they're really decaying. I mean, I just love that, because I think that's just so pretty. I think that's good enough for now. And I like to just let them do their thing, as I like to say.
Let
And
nature
then-
take its course.
Yeah. And then here again, I can scrape in. So I'm gonna go in and scrape that center vein. And then I noticed that these veins, at least on my maple trees, they kind of go from up there and then down to the first ones from way up here. And then down here they go a little bit like that. Doesn't matter so much. I kind of like that. And I don't mind that it's, you know, it's going to dry a little bit lighter. It's going to move a little bit. I'm just fixing a couple of shapes here. Yeah. And I'm going to paint the two other exactly like that. And this area, I think I was probably supposed to have painted that orange, which I could. But you know what? Who says it can't be like a leaf underneath here? So I'm going to go kind of dark and just pretend it's another leaf underneath here. You know, again, it's my painting. I can do what I want, right? And it'll be kind of nice to have a little bit of a dark leaf underneath here that can offset the others.
Squeaky, squeaky.
And like here. So it's almost purpley brown. And then I want to have it a little bit lighter, the top here. I could put a little bit of that orangey glow color in. So it's kind of brown. And then it can push out that other leaf that's on top. Right? I mean, why not? Maybe I even want to do like a little bit like that, little thing sticking up. Yeah. So we just use our imagination. And again, it's not a botanical rendering or anything like that. So I just, and it's just hiding underneath that other leaf. And I can't paint that until this is dry. So then I have a dark. That's pushes out the others. And then this one, it's okay for the first time around. And now we can go in and put a little bit more dimension once we have all the local color on. And we can kind of build out and do the stems and all that stuff. Okay, so let's do the last two leaves I have there. And I'm gonna do one wet on wet, and the other I'm gonna do wet on dry, so you can see you can do either way. So I put a little bit of water. Don't like load it up with a lot of water. It's a small little shape, right? So can you see that where I put the water? Not all the way out to the edges, but kind of like the main shape. And it's a little pink, so you can see it even better. So let's go in with this color here. That was that mixed color I had. And I'm just, this one is like this. And like this. And maybe I'll put a little bit more of that yellow in here to make it a little bit more glowy up there. So I have all this water inside it, so you can see how it kind of runs. Might have a little too much water on the brush. Maybe I want to go in and do it a little darker down here. Run that together. And just go into a little bit of that one. So I like to have these golden colors just kind of mix and mingle inside the leaf, because I think that makes it more interesting. And they really are, I mean, a spectacle in all sorts of colors and stuff. So I think, and don't worry about, the shapes don't have to be like perfect, because they're also kind of decaying, and you know, some little things have little things are falling off, or you know, they got half eaten, and all sorts of stuff is happening to these poor little things. But can you see how by just letting the colors mix and mingle, you know, I don't really feel I need to do a whole lot more to that one. I'm going to let it sink in a little bit, and then I'm going to scrape out a little bit of veins. But other than that, there's a little white spot here. Just take care of that. There. So then the other one, let's just do that with some color. I'm going to start with a little bit of a golden color here. So I already put that dark leaf underneath here, because remember I had that orange spot that was not really supposed to be there, but then I just made it into a leaf that's underneath, so it's hidden. And so here I'm doing it wet on dry. So when you do it wet on dry, make sure you have it wet enough at the edge there that you don't get a line. And now as I'm going over the orange part, I want to switch to more of a reddish. And I can even put a little bit of the blue in. because it's like really decaying there. There, and then I can put a little bit more yellow in. And some of these, there could be a little bit of even green on them too. Nobody says. Some of them, they'll have maybe a little bit of greenish left, sort of brownish green. There, let them run together. It's not like a bright green, but a little bit of greenish. And then it's a little bit of orangey. But can you see how I'm just making it up as I go? But these are all totally legit leaf.
And you're doing wet on dry.
Wet on dry on this one, but see, I keep the paint wet enough that everything blends. Don't have it so that you get a ton of, see, it's all like blending into each other, no hard edges there. I think I want to get maybe a little bit of that. So maybe I want to put a little bit of reddish in here. So this is fine for a maple leaf. And now I cleaned out my brush and I took most of the moisture out. I just want to get rid of these little white sparkles I have and maybe help the color blend a little bit better. It's like a tie-dyed leaf, this one. It's okay. There. And then before this one dries on me, put the veins in, and then we go down like that, from there to there, from there to there. And then this one I can also, it's not quite as wet because I did it on dry paper, so it dries quicker. And you don't have to get all the veins in, just some of them. There. And there's my leaves. And again, you know, good enough. So I'm gonna let those be for a little bit, and then let's go in and see how we doctor these pumpkins up. So I'm gonna leave this one because we have some wet areas, so we don't want to get into any trouble there. So let's see here. We might have to get ourselves a cleaner color, because now I've pretty much made mud out of everything. So just get that out. I keep my palette a lot cleaner than a lot of painters, let's put it that way. But that's because I like to have nice, clean, crisp colors. You can always dull down colors, but once you have them dull, you can't make them brighter. So I'm pretty much of a bright, I use a lot of bright paint colors in my paintings. That's like my style, I guess. But you know, you can always dull down things if they get too bright. So I think it's from my perspective, it's better to have them, you know, a little too bright, and then you can tone them down. Whereas if you got everything muddy, then you're kind of stuck with mud. So just keep that in mind. That's why I have mainly like fairly pure colors on my palette. I don't have a lot of earth tones and stuff. Of course, I can easily create them as you, look at all this. It's all different kinds of earth tones, right? So let's get some more of our yellow out and some of our red out, that. And then so that's a little bit darker than what I have on. And then I took some of the moisture off my brush. And let's just go in, let's start with an easy one. So here, I want to just bring out these little sections in the pumpkin a little bit more. So that's wet on dry with some of that orange. I clean it out, and then I have my brush to stamp, not wet. And then I go in before this dries on me, and I lose this edge on this side. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So then that edge of that veg
Yes.
pops out. Because I put something darker behind it, because it gets darker as it goes into those little crevices. And we have the light coming from this side, so it'll hit that edge there. And so let's go in and do the same on this next one. Put a little bit of that, little bit darker color. And then I go in with a clean brush and I lose the edge. And sometimes, see, once you start losing the edge, you'll have paint on your brush. So clean it out again. Dab it, so it's just barely damp, and then just go in and make sure that you don't get like a hard line there. Can you see how now it looks much more pumpkin-y? So again, dark pushes back, light brings forward. So let's do it also here. And I skipped a little bit there, but I did that on purpose because then I don't want it quite as dark there. Can you see how it's really, it's getting shape now. So let's flip it around because it's easier for me to get to. So, you know, always, so now I want to have it on this side because this wedge will get more light. This side will get more light than this side because now I'm going away from the light. Can you see that? And it's really important that you lose this edge here so you don't have like a line down. But can you see how it's getting shape?
That's great.
And then let's just continue. We have one more here. So here I can only see this part of it. Like that. Rinse my brush. And again, and then clean water, dab, dab, dab. Before it dries on me, get my little tip of with my damp brush in here. And then we have that. And let's do one more. That's this little guy here. And I'll dab in a little bit more pigment there. And then just kind of pull it out.
So you're losing the line
On the one side,
on the side toward the light.
away from the light.
You're losing the line on the side away.
Yeah. And then here I put a little bit in. Of course, that one. All right, so see how much more shape this pumpkin has than this one.
Yes.
So I think, now I showed you the, and can you see here, I got a little heavy-handed here, but that's okay.
Heavy-handed with what?
With the lines there, I scraped very hard. I didn't need to do it quite that much, but that's okay. So we can divide both our pumpkins that same way. So this one's exactly the same. But I'll save it for you because now you can go down and try this. And then if you get all confused, then I can demo it again on the other one.
Thank you.
So before we dive into this one here, let me show you a method where we can get a little bit more of a speckled look on that green pumpkin. I'm not so, I mean, it's not like my favorite, it's, you know, favorite way I did it. Now that we have access to the dot bottles, thank you, Tom Lynch. You know, there's a little bit of technique to the dot bottle. You kind of tap it. So if you don't just push down like that, tap, 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 tap. Can you see how they will let you tap? And the new ones are actually better.
Oh, that's great.
And it does that spotted, you know.
on my hand.
Yeah. So let's do a little, and so you can see I'm shielding. So I'm doing a little bit of tap, 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 try to get some of those droplets on my green pumpkin. And then I'm going to take a clean piece of tissue and get that water off. And then I'm going to wipe it. And can you see, can you see how I got some more texture? It kind of lightened it up a little bit. I like that a little bit better now. So then we're going to leave that alone. And we're still, you know, we have work to do on that one. But let's just try this orange pumpkin. So again, I get a little bit. So let me show you how I load my brush. I don't go in and load the whole brush up. I go in, it's a damp brush, but it's not dripping wet. And my pigment is also not dripping wet. And I just load up the tip, okay? And I go maybe one little dab on my towel. And then I go in, and my light's coming from this side, so I go in right here behind the edge of this one. Then I rinse out my brush really well, and then I dab it on my towel so it's damp, not dripping wet again, and I go in from the dry side, from the outside, and I just get that damp tip into what I just deposited and blend it in. And sometimes you'll have to go more than once, and you'll have to clean your brush in between, because the minute you start doing that, of course, you're dragging pigment, and you are also getting pigment on your brush. You might have to go in and do it again until you have lost that hard line. And so that popped out that side, right? Because the light's coming from here, this is going in, and then the next section is going out like that, right? So the light would hit that section. That was also confusing to some of you, where to put it. But if you think about it logically, right, this one is sticking out more than that's going in, right? Because they're like, we can see it here, right? Sticking out, going in. So this one's going in, and then this one's coming out. So the light hits like here. Does it make sense? So we'll do the same on this one, because I think still this one will still be hit by the light. So I'm going to go in on this side of it, put a little bit of that pigment, rinse my brush out, dab, and it's just damp. I'm going in from the dry side and just kind of grabbing that pigment and moving it out. And again, might have to go in and do it again to really make sure I lose that edge completely. Now, on this next one, I think actually this one's going to pick up the light more than this one, because now the pumpkin is also round, so it's going away from the light on this side, right? The light's coming from here, so it'll hit here, it'll hit here, it'll hit here, but then I think it'll hit here on this side more than it'll hit on that side. Does that make any sense? Can you see that? Because then we're going away from the light. That's where it gets can get a little confusing. So anyway, I'm going to stick to my story and do it that way. And again, just a little bit. So now I'm saying that this is actually getting more light than that, because the pumpkin is rounding this way, right? It's turning away. And that's can be confusing, but that's why it's good to sometimes just then have a reference that we can actually see and touch and feel that is actually what's happening. So again, lose the edge, make sure I lose it completely. I would say lose the edge, not your mind. And then again, it'll be the same, again, the more you go away from the light. I think that's what can be a little confusing, because it shifts somewhere once you start turning away from the light. But once we have something we can look at, it actually makes complete sense, right? So I'm glad I brought those in. So we can happily carry on. And then here, there's no doubt, it's on this side. It goes up like that.
Now, as you're getting further over, are you making it wider on purpose?
I'm making it a little bit wider because, I feel that there's a little bit more shadow here. It's getting less light. And there we have it. And again, and when you look at it, it also makes sense. It doesn't look like art. So we didn't put the shadow on the wrong side or whatever.
Right.
So that was that. And we could put just a little bit of color on these two stems if we want to. So they can be many colors, but I personally feel that they're mainly, most of the time, they're kind of like a beigey color. So I just, again, I use the colors I already have in my painting, and I dibble dabble around until I find something that's, and sometimes they're a little greenish, and they're all sorts of colors. Lots of water, because they are, I mean, here they made them, on the plastic one here, they made them white, and they are very often kind of grayish. It, you know, it all depends. There are many different types of pumpkins. And so again, we're just gonna put a little bit of color on, and they're gonna be a little bit darker down here, not that much. And I'm gonna put color on the shadow side. That would be that side. And then I'm dabbing in a little, you know, dabbed off some of the pigment. And then I'm gonna go in and do it even paler on this side. And then I can always, and I leave a few little, leave a few little white sparkles there if I want to. And I'm gonna leave, I can put a little color on this one. It's all gonna have color, none of it's gonna be white, but a little bit lighter there.
Nice.
And I like to have, see, it's already giving it some shape, right? Because, you know, I have that little tiny bit of sparkle, I have a little bit more pigment here and a little bit more pigment down here. And we can doctor it up, but that's a good beginning. So since that was successful, let's go ahead and do it on this one. And the top one we've hollowed out. And so I'm just putting, so here I'm putting it a little bit darker. It's a green pumpkin, so this thing is maybe a little bit darker, who knows? It is on mine. And again, if I can, I like to get a little bit of that light white, not the whole way, but you see how I leave a little bit of that white sparkle there, right where those two meet. And I'm painting them next to each other while it's still wet, so they kind of blend a little bit, which I think is ideal. And then I just do like that. And for a beginning, that's fine.
That looks great.
I'd say from beginning, that looks terrific.
So now at least we have them colored. And then since I have your attention up here, let's just get started on the greens. So we want a little bit of a darker green than what we have on there. So again, I'm just going to go into my puddle here and find that's about right. A little bit of yellow, and then we have a mixture of that Antwerp. And dab, and then let's just start with this one. And so it's exactly the same principle as it was with the orange one.
Couldn't see behind your hand.
So like this, get a little bit of that dark green on, and then rinse it out. Dab, dab, dab. Yep, it's clean, dab, dab. And then before this dries on us, so, you know, no answering the phone or anything in the middle of this. And then we go in just with the tip of the brush, and we pull it out.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
And it's nice to have it a little darker down here because the light don't shine and it's shadow and stuff. And we pull it out a little bit more. And like that. Then it already gave it some shape. And dimension, yes. It does make a difference. It does make a difference.
Yeah.
And so we have that little one back here. Hopefully my stem is dry. And just go in here. Just a little bit like that. Rinse out my brush, rinse it out again. Dab, dab, and then I can pull here. A little bit. And actually here, if I can pull out a little bit of that pigment would be good. Like that. And later I'm gonna have it a little darker right here and right here. I have a little cleanup to do here, but that's okay. We'll do that next time. And so it's the same thing.
Can you do the center one?
Yes, I can. So that's gonna be hit by the light, and then I think I'm gonna go in and do this one here. And I'm gonna pull that out. And then here, if I could pull out a little bit of color here, I would be a happy camper. Just a little bit like that. And then here is gonna be super duper dark because now we're moving back. Here's gonna be quite a bit darker, right? Of course, now we're moving away from the light. And lose the edge, lose the edge, lose the edge, like that. And then one more. Do here. And I actually want to go darker there. There. And rinse my brush out, just want to lose that edge. I think I can go in and darken a little bit there. Lose that edge there. So then it definitely looks a lot better than it looked before. I mean, I did not get, I did not get like super bright oranges on mine, and I didn't get hard edged. I got it a little bit more mottled, but I'm okay with that. I don't have quite as bright, but I really like it after I did that little spray job there. That really improved it a lot, I think. So we need to get some more color. So we're gonna revisit the shadows on our pumpkin. So let's just go with some of our transparent yellow, which was the color that we used for our oranges. And rinse that out. And then we used our Quinacrodone red, or whatever red you used, or whatever yellow you used, that's fine. And let's get that out here. And there we have that. And we can always check our dirty water. Yep, red and yellow. Hasn't changed since last time. It makes orange, whether we want it to or not, right? And
It's like Gatorade.
and then we used the Antwerp blue for our green, and that of course mixed with the yellow, and then you can put a little bit of red in to make it not so bright if necessary, because red and green, they're complementary colors, so they're going to neutralize each other. Remember? Yeah. So here we have it. So let's try and put some shadow on the green one. And so I need to put a little bit, so since I just mixed this one with the blue and I don't want to rinse out all that lovely blue color out of my brush, I'm just going to get a fresh brush and dip into the yellow. And see, it does not take very much yellow at all to make that Antwerp blue go green. Because Antwerp blue, or some of you have Prussian blue, same story, or if some of you have phthalo blue, same story. They are all kind of turquoisey, leaning towards the green. Mm-hmm. So, you just whisper yellow to it and boom, it's green. So, and then we could see here again, if I rinse out that green into that orange, can you see how they took it down a notch, so to speak? It's still kind of orangey, but much more subdued. Mm-hmm. So I think this is too bright of a green. So I think I need to put a little bit of red in. So I'm going to start over here. I don't, can you see how it goes brown if you put too much in? So that's why I kind of tiptoe in. I just don't go plunge in the middle of the pool there, and then maybe I get all brown because I had too much red on. So I just do a little bit out here, and then I move into the green until I get the green I'm looking for, which is right around here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So a lot of you, sometimes you end up with these big puddles of colors that were unfortunate, shall we say. And that's because you went all in, so to speak. See, I kind of tiptoe in until I get the combination. See, I still have a little red there, which I can use, and I still have a little much brighter green there. But it's nice to have it kind of like that. Okay, so then I'm going to push over here. I'm gonna go and do a little dab on my towel, and just get all these brushes out of the way. And I want to use a brush. Oops, I still have blue on that one. Rinse that out. It's not so good to let your brushes sit with pigment in the hairs. Thank you. And let it dry in the hairs. I mean, you can rinse it out, but it's just not so good for your brushes. Best to rinse them out. And it's also not very good for your brushes to have them sit like this in the water. It's really not the best. Especially up here in our dry climate, which you can see yours truly, she has obviously not obeyed her own rules all the time. But all the wooden brushes that have like enamel on them, it comes off because, then the wood's still alive in a sense. It'll soak up the moisture, and then it sits for a week and it gets really, really dry. And so that's expansion and contraction constantly makes the paint fall off. Oh well, such is life. Okay, so I'm gonna do the two-brush approach, but that way I don't have to rinse this out. Yeah, well used, exactly. All right, so we have our light coming from here. So it's gonna hit this side, and that means this side here is gonna be more in the shadow. So I'm putting a little bit of that dark green on here, quite wet. And then right away, I take my damp, not dripping wet, but damp brush, and I go in from the dry side and just get the tip into the still moist edge of that green I deposited. And I start getting rid of that edge. Now I have paint on my brush. I need to rinse it out again, dab it, and go in again, just so I don't get I don't want like an outline. So I want to soften this edge. That's what we call it. And then since it's down here, is also away from the light, right? The bottom is going to be a little bit darker, so I might as well put a little bit more green in there while it's still damp. And then just gently, and again, rinse, gently nudge that away. Can you see how that gave it a lot more? And so we can do the same over here. So away from the light. And make sure you get this done in a fast enough manner that this line doesn't dry on you, because it's kind of hard to get rid of then. And again, the same thing. That is the damp brush. Not dripping wet, but clean and dabbed on your towel a bunch of times so it's damp, but not depositing too much water. And it's damp enough to just kind of pull that pigment out. And then here,
are you creating a hard edge on the one side then?
Yes, you're creating a hard edge on the one side. And so here I'm just going to make up that there is actually also an indentation there. So I'm going to make a hard edge there. And then I'm just going to, again, this is a damp brush, clean. And I'm just going in and just, so it's not like a line, it's just gradual. And there we have that. And then
it gives it so much dimension already.
Yeah. And so then we're also going to go here. And again, we can go a little bit further at the bottom here, because the bottom is going to be darker. And again, damp, not wet, but damp brush. This was actually a little bit too wet. So if you feel that it's too wet, back on the towel, back on your water control station, and get some of that moisture off. That's why it's controlling the water in your brush. That's why I like to call it a water control station, like there. And actually on this one here, there will also be a little bit of a shadow on this side, because it goes in. Remember we debated that last time?
Oh, yeah.
So let's go in and do that while we can. And then again, damp, not wet, but damp brush, and get in there. And just a tip, yet I don't put the whole brush in. Can you see how I'm just doing the tip, and then I'm kind of pulling it out. I'm giving it somewhere to run, but not dripping wet. And I was a little timid here, so let's go in and be a little bit braver. Put a little bit more. There we have it. I want it darker down there at the bottom to say that it also, curves under and away from the light. And now I need to rinse, because, after you've moved it, you will have pigment on the brush. The clean brush will no longer be clean. And we can actually also go in on this side here, just up a little bit. Also, again, to get more of that curve on. And then I want it to disappear. Because here on the middle it's fatter, right? There. Can you see how gave it more? Yeah, gave it more dimension. And then here, it's behind, it's overlapped just a tiny bit by this little orange pumpkin. So here it'll be awesome if I can get it like really dark. And I'll just do like this. Give it a little bit more darkness there. And then right away, and I always turn my painting around so I can get to wherever I need to get to with my damp brush without putting my hand smack dab in wet paint. So, you know, I paint a lot upside down or from the side. It doesn't really matter. And then, see how nice that is? At least I think it's nice. And then here, behind this little stem here, and remember we gave that stem just a very indistinct little color. We're gonna do a little bit more to them. And then again, damp brush, and just pull that out. There we have it. So that's pretty nice on the green. And of course on the orange, there's no mystery here. It's exactly the same way, only different color. So we'll take some of the yellow and we'll take some of the red. And there's a nice color. I think I want to make it a little bit darker, so I put a little bit more red in. And actually what I could do is I could go out here and get just a tad. See how little, just a little bit of that more muddy color. Can you see how that darkens it a little bit? And it cools it down a little bit actually also. Just because we know we're going for shadows here. So let's see if we can build this shadow here a little bit more. So here I'm also putting a lot more on the bottom here. Might even put a little bit more of that red in, just to make it darker. And then up, and then I'll go from here. And I'll maybe leave a little bit in between. I can rinse it out, or I could have gone with my other brush. Now I rinsed it out. And then before it dries on me, go in with my, and sometimes if you get little droplets on the handle, get them off, because I guarantee you they're gonna fall in and create a bloom when you're, when you're busy doing other stuff. That's probably happened to some of you. It certainly happened to me. And see, now I'm dragging out that pigment, but now see, when I wipe it on my towel there's a little bit of orange, because you know this is the important part. Back again with a clean tip, so you don't end up, because sometimes if we don't go out far enough, we end up then when it dries there's kind of like a ghost line. I call them ghost lines because they show up when I'm not looking.
Especially on Halloween.
Especially on Halloween. So I'm also going to do this one here, same way. And then I'm going to let you have time to go down and do your own. And I'm going to go into this little bit dirty one. And here I'm going to do, especially up here, I'm going to do a little bit wider and a little bit wider at the bottom. And then I tend to just leave it a little bit, even with a gap like that in the middle, because that's what it kind of bulges out. And there won't be as much shadow. And then again, before it dries on me, and see, then we transfer a little bit of that color anyway to the middle, so that's why sometimes I like to just skip the middle. And can you see, now I have color on the tip. I need to rinse it out, because otherwise, I can go all the way over to the other side and I keep, having pigment on. That's not what I want. And there it was too wet, so then back on the towel. So right away, if I can feel that I got too much water on, I'm back on the towel immediately. And here I need to go further because I can see, otherwise I would get that ghost line.
Yeah, that's great.
And there we have it. And then we're going to let that dry. And then now this is the middle of the pumpkin. And then it is that it shifts. So then we have on this side And then when these are both dry, we can put a little bit on either side of the middle one, because it goes in like that. It goes in like there, gets hit right there. So that was what we discussed last time, and it's so much. I still kept, I still brought this one, and if anybody needed to take a look at it again, sometimes it really helps to get that. You can feel it and you can see it. All right, I'll leave you with that for now. A drawing where you have the little twigs and everything drawn in, or you can also just ignore them and just do your own. And I just want to show you different ways of doing these little fillers. They're kind of like fillers. They will be excellent also if you wanted to do like a flower arrangement and stuff. And so this would be more like the stuff you would put in between. It's like if you were thinking about putting a bouquet in a vase, and you know how you arrange the flowers, and there's a little hole here, and you put a little, baby's breath or something else in, or a couple of grasses or something, or little twigs, all depends. So this is kind of fall inspired. And we already painted some of the leaves. I did some of them green, and I did some of them in fall colors. And now we want to start getting some little twigs in. So I have a puddle here that's pretty dark. And if I put a little bit more red, for instance, in this green, because we know they're complementary colors, voila, that's dark. So there we have a nice dark. That would be great for some of the branches. So, and I used my little, and I'm going to use my little rigger brush. This one is a number 3, and this one's a number 6. So you can see whatever kind of rigger brush you have. And rigger brush is just a brush that is round, but has long hairs, and hopefully it comes to a nice point. They're great for these little lines. It's also called a liner, or it's called a script brush, because it's great for making skinny lines, or you can also use it for doing calligraphy, which yours truly, she is lousy at calligraphy. So I'm not going to try and show you that. What I like to do is so let's just find a little branch here I could use. So I put water on my brush here, and I'm just going to run it up a little bit. And we can't barely see that water I put on. But right away, I'm going to dab into my thick dark paint, and I can just see that can you see how it follows the water, as we already have observed, right? So I love to do it this way, but you don't have to. You could also just do it with pigment on and do the line that way. But I don't know, I feel it's a little bit less intimidating to first do it with the water, because that way if I mess up, it's only water. I can dab it off and I can try again. Whereas if I have the dark pigment on, I'm kind of stuck with it, right? So, and then I don't try to do the whole thing like that, but I get started. And then I feel a little bit more comfortable. And what I do is, so sometimes I'll go into this one, but sometimes I'll go into some of the other puddles. And that's what I just did, so I get a little bit of a variation in the color. And that looks like then there's a little light falls on the branch there, and a little shadow falls there. And that way you get a little bit more variety. And when I load up my brush, I will often roll it in the pigment, so that I have a nice point.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe you're trying to get colors different.
No, that's for the point. So I just start with a branch, and then, okay, great. what I was trying to get to was something where I could attach that thing.
Yeah.
That doesn't float in. So I get a kick out of working this way. Now for some people that's way too unstructured. They don't like that. And they like to have the drawing and they can follow that and then you can add on to that. So that's all personal preference. And then here I can do like this and I can just come up with some, I did draw in a few little things and you know,
Is it
can you
still
see
wet
how,
here, Eva?
pardon me?
Is that still wet on that side?
No,
Oh,
wasn't anymore. So now I'm doing it on, I have a lot of pigment on here and then I'm doing it on dry paper. I like to vary, and I don't feel obligated to finish this whole branch. Now I feel like, let's do another branch. And then I can always add on to it because once I get started, it starts telling me where it needs a little, you know, something going on. So I'll just do a couple more branches, but I like to start with the branches. And so let's just go and get, and it's good if I can go behind here. And then right away, while I can kind of still see it, I'm just going to dab in a little bit. And that wasn't apparently not where I put it, so that's okay. Sometimes I can't see it. Ah, there it is. So then I need to make it a little fatter down here, but that's fine. And see how it's going behind that? So it's also very, very good to try and build it so that you have things overlapping. And since I couldn't find my water, I'm just gonna try and take that away. And I'm not gonna worry about little kind of weird things. Don't worry about them. We'll just make something out of them later. So for instance, I could go here, behind. Ha! They're overlapping. So it's a little bit of problem solving sometimes. And then I'm gonna put a little bit, while it's still damp, I can put a little bit darker in here and maybe put a little darker in here. And on this side, and then I can just do another little branch out like that, and maybe a little one like that. Okay, maybe I'll do one more of these branches. And again, I'll just use my dirty water. Maybe you can see it a little bit better. Maybe I can see it a little bit better. It's not just you seeing it. So what I would really like, so I can't do it in there. I'll have to attach it later because these branches are still wet. But I would really love having a branch that kind of dips down like that because I need something in that space down there. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And even if you drew in some of the, you know, from my drawing, use that as a base and then you add on your own as, you know, as you go. And can you see how I'm just dabbing in, not the whole way, but I dab in where I can see it and then it spreads a little bit. And then I have the opportunity to go in and maybe put a little bit of a different color in the other places. So I'm just gonna get going on this one a little bit and then I wanna get up here and maybe like that.
Oh.
You see how you can just, and I can go in and put a little bit more color on later if I need to, if there's some areas I feel I needed to darken up, but it's just to get it going. And now here, I think it's dry in here, so I can just go behind here and see, then it'll just be like this dark mess in there. So now I'm beginning to have some nice flow. I need a little bit more out there, but I could do that, for instance, here. And you can see how I wiggle it a little bit, and I do a very light touch. The hard thing is to get them skinny. You can always fatten them up, but you know, if you keep fattening up, it ends up being like big trunks you have out of this poor little pumpkin. So a little at a time, and I can you see as it dries, see how nice it is that I have these color variations, because it really looks like the light is catching, or maybe a shadow, and it's turning and stuff like that. Yeah. So those are the branches, and I just add on more little. I can add on a few little leaves, and I can add on some other stuff. Some of them I could add on some little berries, for instance, Some little berries could be on some of them. So I could do that.
Yeah,
For instance, here.
lopped off some rose hips.
Yeah, rose
So I
hips,
could see
exactly.
what they look like.
Like that. So let's put some little rose hips up. So I just dipped into the red. And I make like a little, doesn't have to be a perfect circle at all. And let's do some over here. And I can put more little branches on as we go. So let's just put some of these on. And now I have to let them dry a little bit before I can do the next thing, because then I need to put those little dark things in. But if it's this wet, it'll just go everywhere. So I have to wait for that. So back to these here. Now I think these little guys, they are dry enough. So I'm gonna take my rigger brush, and I'm just gonna go into some of this dark paint, and it should be thick, not too watery, because if it's too watery, and you might even just kind of get the water out of your brush if it's too wet, because otherwise that dark paint is gonna rush in. But I like to get it in while there's still a little bit of dampness, so you get kind of like a softer edge there. But can you see? Rose hips, and any kind of other berry, you can also just do them. And it's not all the rose hips. Maybe you want to have like down there. You can also, let's see if I can dab. You can also, if you can see like that. It doesn't always have to be like out at the end. Some of them, you'll see them from a little bit of a different angle. It's so wet, I should probably not do it, but see if you do like there. Can you see how it just kind of floats in a little bit, and it looks more natural that way? And I don't mind, it can be a little crooked. And so that's the dark I have on here. So let's do a few more. So I really like to do some more of these little side branches, and I can do one there, and I can do. Can you see how you can start building onto your little branch, so it really gets more of those little, and these little twigs, they get skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. And let's see this one. If I do a little bit of dark on either side here, and then on the other side here,
Comes in front. Here.
then it's in front. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So you can have so much fun with it. Or you can just say, I'm not into all that. Enough already. I wanted to do a couple other shapes I wanted to show you. So now I'm loading up my brush with something that's a little bit more on the green side. Not bright green, but a little bit greener. And let's go in here and do one like that. Maybe I want to do one like that, and I can do one in here.
Like some grasses or something.
Yeah, it could be grasses. I'm going to show you different things that it can be. There. And then some will be coming up here. And some will be coming out here. And I don't have to worry so much about it going over those darker ones, because it's, it disappears on those there. All right, so what can we make them into? We can make them into many different things. Right now, let's make them into some
Wheat.
we could make wheat, and right now I want to have lavender, some little lavender. So the best colors for the lavender is either to take your French ultramarine blue or your your cobalt blue. So here I took cobalt blue, and then I put a little bit of the red in, so you get kind of like a lavender color, right? That looks like lavender to me. There, yeah. And you can do like several colors. You don't have to do one. And then again, I'll use my little rigger brush, and then I just go in and do. So this is the ones where it's really good if you had too much coffee. So you have this shake. So you have this shake. So I just start down there, and I usually too much coffee.
What happens if you have too much wine?
More free flow.
Yeah. And then if that's a little too dark, just do like that. Boom.
Oh, nice. Cute.
That's all, right?
Yeah. That's easy.
Lavender.
Sounds
You don't want to
easy.
do them. Yeah, it is easy. You don't want to do them like too perfect, because nature is perfectly imperfect. Now, sometimes I like to go in and then first do a couple of dabs with water on, just so then I go in with pigment on, and I can't see where the water is. So some places it's going to hit the water like there, and other places it's going to hit dry, and you get a little bit more variety that way. Sometimes that can be a little easier, and I like it that they kind of dip down a little bit, because so much lavender on these things. And go in and darken a few places. So there's another one, and I like to dab a little bit. And since we have all those there, we should have some here. And I think I like to do that same thing. Put a little bit of water on first. For some reason, I'm a big fan of that, because I feel it gets a little bit more random that way.
If you hadn't used the salt in the background, you could use your dot water bottle. Maybe.
Yeah, you can totally. You could do that even with the salt. It's just you get
It's kind of
that one.
counterproductive with the salt.
The dot bottle is a little harder because it goes. It's not going to go in the right shape. So that's why I am more for just dabbing it in, and then this one can go either in front or behind, whichever way. But can you see how that's kind of, and then these are overlapping, so obviously the rose hip is in front. So there we have that. Put a little bit of darkness in a few places there. And now so it's always good to have a minimum 3 of something. That's just a design. And then let's do I think I'd like to show you on a separate piece of paper. Grass is how grasses grow. Grasses, those are really fun to do too. Maybe I'll go with a little bit fatter one. All depends, but that way you can see it better. So I'm gonna go in and do kind of a muddy color, little of everything. Grasses can be, any color. They can be green, and they can be kind of, yellow and brown and purple, whatever. So the first one, so you do like that. And then, so now I needed to have more paint on. So go in, press down, lift up.
Yay.
And then the next blade of grass will go press down. And then the next one will go up. That's how grasses are.
You don't get all those little straight lines, just
Yeah. Put one on there. So that takes a little practice, but it's really fun. And of course, this is a big old fat grass, that wouldn't fit in. But it was just so you can see it better.
Yeah.
So let's do that again.
the kind you'd spray in your yard.
Yeah,
Weed killer.
exactly. So
You don't want in your yard.
I'm pressed down. See, you need to have it loaded. See, I ran out of pigment here. Press down and lift up. So you can do that whole thing. It's the first blade of grass, it sticks up. And then as you move down, the next one is a little bit further down, it goes up. And it goes kind of more like that. And then the next one, you go a little stem up and it goes down, press and release. And you can do one more.
Could do corn that way too.
Yeah, it's a big grass.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big
Yeah.
Yeah,
grass.
absolutely.
And so if you want to do some wheats, you can totally do that. So now I want to go in, maybe I do a little bit browner. A little bit more yellow in it. There. And so you can do a wheat. Is that in, I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? So I'll just do it behind here, doesn't matter. And then a bunch of little things like this. They can be little. Can you see? Just like little things like that. And they could be a little bit darker down here if you like. And there you could also put, you know, they also have some little blades here or some little leaves. But just little things out to either side, and you can do them smaller, of course. Do like, you could also start with it if you like, so it's almost like little X's. And then you do a little, you know, if you want little ones. So that's grass, wheat. One more I can show you that's kind of fun, that I personally enjoy. That's teasel. Teasel they're called.
Yeah.
I always call them tassel, but they're really called teasels. So that, and when they get these dried head, and they actually look very much similar to what the cone flowers look like once, you know, they wilt. And then the cone stays, and I personally, I leave them because the birds like them. So let's do a little.
That's where all the seeds are.
Yeah, exactly. And then they are kind of like this. They have more or less kind of like this ovally shape. And you can kind of do like that. Like that. And then they very often, they have these kind of fun little dried sepals, I think they're called. But that's kind of like, you know, that's a nice interpretation of one of those little guys. And if you
like a pine cone.
yeah, it could look like a pine cone, absolutely. And you can, after it's dried, you can also go in and use the tip of your, you know, the really pointy part of your credit card, and you can scrape out a little bit, especially once it starts drying, and you can get a few highlights in there that gives it a little bit more texture. You know, you can do that.
That's great.
So these are all little shapes. I mean, they're not botanical renderings, but they will read like these little shapes, and they're fun to fill out something like this fall-like. And these are all kind of fall-like things because, you know, it's harvest time. And so there's lots of ideas. And so I'll let you go down and create to your heart's content. Okay, so in the process of painting this thing, and I think I'm going to call the top here finished. I think it balances well enough. I wanted to fill out that space, and you know, I think it's a little airy, but I like that. And I think, none of the leaves look too as if they're just floating anymore. They could be attached. Yeah, they're connected. It's enough. And then I have some little boo-boo up here. I'm not going to worry so much about that because the mat's going to cover that up. I don't even know if I can do anything about it. I don't want to start scrubbing really up there because can maybe try and see a little clean. No, I do not want to do Mr. Clean up there because, you know, I have that salty effect, and then then you don't notice it too bad there, but then if I start scrubbing with Mr. Clean, then it'll really stick out like a sore thumb. So that's an example of making a small boo-boo into a big boo-boo. So I'll stick with my small boo-boo. Then I had another little accident here because I knocked down that thing, and then I dropped my brush that I had just loaded up with berry color, and it was just a big mess. So I'm not going to freak out about it too much. And this is luckily in an area, it was white. So I'm going to take Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, the original kind. I'm going to dip him into a little bit of water, clean water, and I'm going to squeeze out as much as I can, and I'm even going to dab excess water off on paper towel or Kleenex, and then I'm gonna gently scrub. And here I don't have to, you know, worry about because it's far away from everything, so it didn't have to be. And voila, look at that, gone. Boo-boo gone. So, you know, then there's a pigment on here, so you always have to make sure that your Mr. Clean is clean. So don't go scrubbing with the one that has little traces of pigment because then you're going to scrub it into the paper. Cut it off or rip it off or whatever you want to do. When it's wet, it's very easy to just kind of nip it off like that. And then you have clean again. So I already have some of my yellow, couple of puddles, and so I'm gonna get some red, and I'm gonna get some of my blue. I'm gonna use the Antwerp that I have used in this painting. Yeah. So I am traditionally a big fan of when I'm almost done with a painting, I do not particularly think it's a good idea to all of a sudden introduce a new color for unity. It can very easily start then looking weird as if it's another painting, it doesn't belong, you know? So it's best to stick with the colors you already have. And I have plenty of colors here to choose from, my goodness. I have yellow, I have red, I have blue, and that's, you know, all I need. And purple, which I made from, so I also have cobalt blue. I actually also have, because I have that in there. So I can put a little bit of cobalt blue next to here, just so that it doesn't feel left out. So there we have that, a little bit. Cobalt blue is such a mild color, it doesn't do much. It's not nearly as strong a pigmented color as this Antwerp blue. And one more. I think I want a little bit more red possibly. And see, I already have, you know, kind of a dirty orange that I made over here, brownish color. So all the colors in the book, there they are. And now I'm going to wet underneath. So I've got to be a little careful here. And in the meantime, hopefully that thing has dried. And so I'm wetting underneath my pumpkins with clean water. And there we have it. And then I want to go up to maybe about here. And then I'm just gonna have a line there. And let's go in here. And you can see I have a lot of water on it, pools on me. And so
you're not doing everything.
I'm not doing everything, I'm just doing the bottom. And so
I brought mine too far down.
So I have that like there.
There you go.
So it's important when I decide where that line is so it's the table or the ground they're lying on, whichever, is that I didn't do it so that it is right on top of something.
Okay.
Or, you know, so that we get these tangent lines. Remember we talked about tangent lines and that they're not very good? All right, so this is good enough. And I have all sorts of colors on here. What's on here? Nothing? Okay. So I'm just gonna go in and use some of these colors. Right now I have the red. Let's go in and do a little bit of this one here. Just want to get a little red on here. Apparently yours truly, she didn't get very much water down at the bottom here. So I'm just gonna spray in a little bit. And what do we have on here? Oh, we have the Cobalt, whatever. I'm not so worried about it because I'm gonna mix all colors on. And then what are we gonna get? We're gonna get a neutral. But I'd like to get a variety so that maybe it could be interpreted like also some leaves or whatever.
So you're using your dagger brush?
Right now I'm using my dagger brush, yeah. And now I want to go in and get some of that green because I'm also thinking about what I have, you know, next to them. There's a little splatter. So I don't want red underneath the orange, for instance. Do you see that?
Yes.
Because I want to, you know, the whole idea is I want, yeah, complementary colors more or less, and I want something that's going to push out the subject matter, which are the pumpkins. And so let's go in and do a little red in there. And we want to do a little bit of the same over here. So I don't want to too much green under the green, and I don't want orange under the orange, if that makes any sense to you. And see here what I said, you know, I didn't really have to fix this thing. Of course, I am putting something darker around it, so it's not really an issue. But, and then here, I do like to have more of that red-ish color. And we don't want anything like really bright at the bottom because I don't want people to look there. But see how pretty it is.
That's very pretty.
You know, I can make that into something, and it harmonizes with the painting because, you know, these colors are already in the painting. So that's why you don't want to introduce something like brand spanking new. So let's see if we can go in
So if we
here.
did the plastic wrap, you'd use the same colors.
I would use the exact same colors, and let me just see. And this doesn't have to be like completely straight. So I think it was here. And let's put a, and now I get a chance to clean up anything on towards.
So is that section that you're working on now dry?
It's more or less, it's beginning to dry because, you know,
So there was water on it?
there was
Okay.
water on it, but it's beginning to dry. And I didn't leave myself enough red, I don't feel, but let's go in and do a little bit of this. And there's that. And I do want to rinse that out and get a little bit of red because, you know, I want it to balance what I had here, there. Just so not, and there. So I'm keeping everything a little bit wet still. And my main purpose here is I do not want to have any, see there's one of those drops. Ooh,
Ghost drop.
yeah. So around here, I don't want to have any hard edges in my background. So I want everything to kind of flow together. Okay, so that's pretty okay. And now I'm gonna go and make myself a real dark by mixing all my puddles together. And again, the red ran out. so everything is kind of turning green, right? Because it's the yellow and the blue, and that's not really, I mean, I don't mind green, but I don't want green everywhere. See the red and the green, complementary colors, so gray each other out. And so now, while it's still wet, I would very much like to just catch all the edges here with something very dark as a shadow. But not a hard shadow, because you know it's snowing and stuff, so it's not like a really bright day. But there will still be some shadow, it kind of grounds them. And of course we want to do it up here too. And then also not too bright of a color. And I'm just going to pull it up like that. And then I like to always make sure that my bottom and my corners, and that was a little too bright. So anything that's too bright, I go over it. But can you see how now they are they're grounded?
Yes.
And I kind of like to have some little things sticking up here. Just because then this could also be some little vegetation or something, who knows? They're sitting on the ground. Maybe that's what it is, some little grasses. There we have it, one more, real dark. I can still throw in a little real dark. And again, missing in action, this red. See how that changes it right away? Color theory right here in front of your eyes. So let's just do it again a little bit. And I have a couple of little white sparkles. Can you see that? I don't really want them. There would be no reason for things to be sparkly white down there. And I really want it darken underneath this green pumpkin. And there. Drag it out, drag it out. So I think that's a nice enough background. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
I kind of like that. And I can't do anything to the stems until that's dry. I could theoretically do to that, but I'll let you go down and paint a little bit there. And then I'll do the stems last. That's the last little detail we're gonna do. So mine has dried, or almost dried. And so you can see my colors, they ran together a lot. I'm not really super crazy about it, but it is what I got. Not gonna worry about it. And what I did was I signed my name while it was still wet with a stylus, like one of these here. And then what I did was I took a towel, paper towel, Kleenex, and I just did like that. And then, you know, the pigment, since it was still wet, it stays in the indentation. And so that's another way of signing it. So that way it definitely blends in.
Oh, the stylus was just scratching? Yeah.
Like this.
And then the tissue highlighted it a little.
And then, and then I just did like that.
Okay.
And so that's another way of signing it. There are many ways.
I like that.
And I got it a little close to the edge, but I think I can still kind of get away with it. You have to be careful you don't sign like all the way at the bottom and all the way out to the edge if you put a mat on it, because it's going to overlap a little bit. So I'm pretty darn close to it. So a little bit higher up would have been smarter, but oh well. And then now, since everything kind of, you know, blended together a little bit more than I'm really all that crazy about, I feel that now my pumpkins are floating again. So first things first, I'm gonna let them float for just a moment while I go in and I do my little detailing on the stems. So I cleaned out my palette because I couldn't stand the mud I had there anymore. And so I just put the 3 primary colors out that I've used in this one. The Quinacrodone red, I have my Antwerp blue, and then I have my transparent yellow. I could put a little bit of, I also had a little bit of that cobalt blue. These are the colors. These are the 3 colors I used, right?
Right.
And look at my painting. All these colors stems from these. So it's basically still just the primary colors, only I had 2 of the blues. But I hardly used any of the cobalt. I used some cobalt for the background. And I used some cobalt to get my lavenders there. But anyway, what I can do now is I can mix them all together. So the red and the blues, they're gonna give me purple, no surprise. And then my yellow is gonna make the purple neutral or almost like a black, right? All depends. Here it's more brownish, there it's more. And you can get all sorts of variations of a neutral color. That's good enough for me. So, and you can see I have it quite thick. You can see the brush stroke when I do. Sterling Edwards, he did this with his finger.
Yeah.
I don't like to use my finger for that. But then he doesn't worry much, not that I worry very much about my manicure, but I worry maybe slightly more than he does about his. Okay, so the light's coming from this side. I'm using a fairly small brush, and we have already established that the paint is pretty thick. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in, and I'm just going to, might even use a smaller brush. I'm just going to go in and darken a little bit on this side of the shadow side of the stem. And I'm just putting some little marks in like that. And then I'm going in and just kind of smoothing them out a little bit. Can you see how it doesn't take much to do this stuff? And then maybe I'll put a little bit at the bottom here. And then up. These here, you know, there are many different variations of these stems. All depends on how long ago this pumpkin was picked. Sometimes they'll still be a little greenish. This one has been sitting around for a while. And then here, I'm going to go in and do a little bit down here. And again, what did I do with my brush here? I'm going to go in with a damp brush and just kind of put a little bit in like that. I mean, to me, that's getting pretty close to how I want to have it. And I like to try, if I can, to leave a little bit of a highlight. Can you see there's a highlight here?
Yeah.
But I don't want it like too obvious. Here I had it, I had saved a little bit of a white edge, which I really, really like. Gonna go in and put a little bit on here. Do the same. Here I had a little bit more detail on my stem already. I had to darken this area a little bit. And I'm just doing some little lines kind of in the direction like how it grows. And then I smudge them out. I'll put a little bit of a low light, you can call them, behind that edge and then smudge it out. And I want to do a little tiny bit going down, because I can see kind of like the top, and that top part like I have there also, that's definitely lighter. I know that because the light hits it and it also is lighter. But can you see by just giving that little tiny bit of a color to it, a little bit more color to it, it just brings those stems out and make them look exactly how they are, kind of a little rugged. Nothing too perfect here. But can you see how it helps that I smudge it out?
Yeah.
That's what does it.
I know.
Good enough for me. And you can put a few little lines in, and you know, you can fiddle around with it too much. And so I'm going to stop right now. Maybe a little bit here. I always say that and then I do something else. It's kind of like,
You have to walk away and then come back the next day and go,
yes.
oh, there's something real obvious I missed.
Exactly. And so I just noticed like here, need to just clean up a little bit here. Just like that. Good enough.
Did you have color on that or just water?
No, I just made myself that orange,
okay.
and I did a big no-no, because I put my red brush in here to my yellow. It's not to be done ever, and I did it. So you didn't see that, and I'm gonna remove the evidence right away.
Fix it.
Yes, exactly. I mean, and so that's another reason why I love to have my colors dry, because then exactly that, I can go in and can do that. I don't lose the whole thing. And I can also see now that I'm looking at it, I have a little splatter of something there. I think most likely blue. And so with a little brush, I can go in and I can take it out. And nobody's the wiser.
Is
There.
that yellow again?
transparent yellow.
Transparent, yeah.
My favorite
You
yellow.
gave me
Okay.
the numbers, yeah.
Yeah. So one more thing I have to do here for my own satisfaction. I put a little bit more blue in. Maybe I'll put a little bit more yellow in. Not yellow, red. Red is what I wanted. Because I don't want it green. So kind of a purpley color. Really dark also. Because, you know, as I said, I am not so happy. They're floating.
Yeah.
So I need to go in and take care of that. So
Make sure they
again,
don't drown.
yeah. So I want to go in and just pick up underneath here.
Now, is it the color that's working? And that's why we see the shadow, because of the color? You've got the right color.
It's just darker. It's all I want.
Just darker.
Yeah, and shadows tend to be, in my world, kind of bluish purple.
Bluish purple.
Bluish
'Cause you could
Here you
just
can't
go-
see much color. So all it is main thing is it's darker. And see, I'm just pulling it out like that.
But darker could also be black.
It could,
be
but I never,
brown.
yeah, but I don't have
So-
black on my palette. And this is basically, for all intents and purposes, that's pretty close to a black, because especially since I'm putting it over that.
Yeah.
And I kind of like if I can get a little bit of
Those
texture on
shadows
it.
I've seen painted are usually like a blue-gray color.
Yeah, exactly. And black shadows look so dead.
Yeah, they don't look good. That's why I was wondering
So,
what color. I like
yeah.
that color.
So, and again, I just use the colors I have
Look at
already
that.
in the
Wow.
painting, right?
Yep.
That's the always, I think, the best way of going. So I'm just gonna pull that
That's
out a
key.
little bit. So here,
Yeah.
much better. Now they're sitting down again.
Oh, yeah.
They're not floating. And there's something
Yeah.
light that I don't like, so I'm gonna take care of that. And I don't mind a little bit of that texture. That's, you know, because they're sitting obviously on the dirt or on the grass, not on dirt, but on the grass or something.